what is a business model? What are all the pieces? Well, let's take a look. And a business model is how a company creates value for itself while delivering products or services for its customers. Now, if you think about it, in the old days, we'd think about how to organize a company around functional organizations. We think, no, a company is about its sales department or its engineering department, and you would draw an org chart. But now we're going to draw a very different diagram. We're going to draw a diagram of how to think about all the pieces of a business. And so let's take a look at these 9 boxes. 9 boxes to describe any company from the world's largest to a 2-person startup starting in your parents' garage. Let's take a look at the first piece called the value proposition. The value proposition answers the question, what are you building and for who? The value proposition says, hey, it's not about your idea or product, it's about solving a problem or a need for a customer. That is, what pain are you solving, what gain are you creating, and more importantly, who are your customers? Now, value proposition is a fancy word for what product or service are you building. This is where you normally would list all your features and here's all the speeds and feeds and benefits and whatever, but you're really going to be asking a different question than might have been used to. It's not all about your technology. Your technology is just part of the value proposition. Customers really don't care about your technology. The customers are trying to solve a problem or fulfill a need. By the way, we'll be talking about this through multiple lectures. The difference between a problem and a need is, a problem is, I have an accounting problem, or I want to use a word processor. And those types of products solve problems. But there are other things that human beings do, like I want to be entertained, or I want to have a date. Those are some basic hardwired social needs. Or I want to communicate with my friends, like Facebook or Twitter. Those are needs. Needs are different than problems. And by the way, if you could find products that solve needs, your total available market, as you'll see later, is huge compared to I solve specific problems. So the next thing is, who are my customers? Who are they and why would they buy? And as you'll hear a number of times, your customers do not exist to buy, you exist for them. And what you're going to do by getting out of the building is figuring out all their geographic, social characteristics, demographics, such that you actually could draw and put up a picture on your wall of who the archetype is or who the persona is of your customer. And it turns out that in most startups, you might have more than 1 or 2 or 3 types of customer archetypes and personas, but you need to understand them in detail. And there is no possible way you could have anything but a hypothesis on day 1 of who they are. The next is channels. How does your product over here get to your customers over here? And we use distribution channels to do that. Now what's really interesting is pre-1990s, the only channels to get to a customer was a physical channel. That is, you went to a store, you had salespeople, there was physical distribution. But since the mid-1990s, in the last couple of decades, we now have virtual channels. The web, mobile, cloud. And so distribution channels, the first question you want to ask is, how will I be selling and how will I be distributing my products? Are they through physical channels, or are they web mobile? Or given today, almost every physical channel also has a web presence. What is the relationship of how your product gets from your company to the customers? Customer relationships is kind of the fourth piece. And customer relationships has a really interesting interaction with these other 3 pieces. It basically says, how do I get customers, how do I keep them, and how do I grow them? And just like thinking about distribution channels, these are very different for web mobile than they are for physical channels. But visually, they kind of look like this double-sided funnel. So let's just take a look at quickly a web example. In getting customers, you're going to be worrying about how do I acquire them? That is, how do I get them even to my website? How do I activate them? That is, how do I make them do something? And then later on, we'll see after I got them, how do I keep them around? That is, how do I not lose them through attrition and churn? And then what can I do once I have customers to make them spend more money or use my product even more? And so one of the things we'll be thinking about is, how do I get, keep, and grow customers? And just like every other step, you might have hypotheses on day one, but you're only going to figure this out when you're out of the building. The next thing is revenue streams. How do you actually make money from your product and service being sold to customer segments? Revenue streams basically ask the question, what value is the customer paying for? And it actually has you think about, what's the strategy of how I'm going to capture that value? Is it I'm going to just have a direct sale and it's a transaction based on price? Is it a freemium model where I'm going to give away the product for free and hope that some portion convert later? Is it a license or subscription model? That revenue model is different than the pricing tactics. That is, what is the dollar or pound amount or euro amount that I'm going to be charging? Again, the only way to figure this out is being able to interact with tens or hundreds or thousands of customers till you finally understand what the right revenue stream and revenue model is. The next piece you want to think about is, what are the key resources? What do you need to make the business model work? What assets are important? And what's an example of an asset in a key resource? Well, finance. Do you need capital? Do you need a line of credit? Some assets and resources are physical. Do you need physical plant, like a manufacturing line? Do you need specialized machines? Do you need vans and for delivery? Do you need cars? Is there something else you need? Is there intellectual property you need? Is there patents you need to acquire or protect? Do you need to acquire customer lists? Or is it just that you need to get great people, great software programmers in a specific area, or great hardware designers, or great manufacturing people? And then finally, again, the interaction between intellectual and human capital that's another key resource. What specifically do you need to do to keep these people, and who are they? The next piece is, who are your key partners and suppliers? And partnerships are kind of interesting, is we need to ask ourselves, before what's the deal, is what exactly are we acquiring from partners? And also, what activities are they going to perform and when? And this is where startups sometimes make a mistake of thinking, well, large companies do partnerships, I guess I need those too on day one. Turns out the types of partnerships you need in year one are certainly not the ones you're going to need in year 3 or 5 or 10. And the types of partnerships could be strategic alliances, joint ventures, just regular suppliers and buyers. And so you need to be thinking through who they are and actually getting out of the building and testing them. Next are key activities. What's the most important things you need to do for the business to make the business model work? Are you in the production business? Are you making something? Or are you in the problem-solving business, like you're doing consulting or engineering? Or are you managing supply chains? What are the key activities you need to become expert at? And then finally, all this adds up on the left-hand side, over here, to costs. What are the costs and expenses to operate the business model? One of the interesting things about cost is it's not just the obvious ones, like people or buildings or materials. What you're really going to be asking are, what are the entire costs to operate our business model? And so you want to think about what are the most important costs you need to worry about? What are the most expensive resources you're going to need to pay for? And what key activities are the most expensive? And then you want to ask the typical accounting things, what are fixed costs? What are variable costs? Are there economies of scale? And you want to start getting a good handle on what it is that will end up costing you money to run your business.